Taoiseach, over the last decade, a radical active women's movement has made huge gains, forcing Conservative governments, both here and in several Latin American countries where the Catholic Church has also historically been dominant, to finally provide abortion rights. But now, though, there seems to be a growing backlash against the rights that women have won, with all the misogyny around the issue following the Supreme Court decision, an appalling decision to reverse Roe versus Wade, and this is triggering abortion bans in many US states. And of course we know that banning abortion doesn't stop abortion, it only drives it underground and hurts the poor and the most marginalised the most. And I want to quote the Justice Minister in the papers today when she said, "There is just a feeling that whatever about Roe versus Wade, there is a feeling of going back a little, so it's important to push back." So the best defence for the right of women to choose is to push forward. Rights for women especially can never be taken for granted. Conservatives' religious right in all countries will always try to take over and take back those hard-won rights. So we need the promised review to the Termination of Pregnancy Act, which is committed to be held this year. And I would like to ask you, what will your government do to push back against the backlash against women and trans rights so that they cannot be undermined in the future? And will you commit to abolishing the 3-day wait, which was put into the law as a sop to those types who rejoice over Roe versus Wade? Will you commit to abolishing the 12-week limit and to full decriminalisation of abortion in this country so that women and pregnant people can be guaranteed the very basic right to control their own bodies? Isn't it time now, Taoiseach, to say our bodies, our choice? And I want to put that in the context of the recent report which showed that from 2019, the year we passed the law, over 770 women had to leave this jurisdiction again to travel to the UK for abortion. And we also have the scandalous situation in Northern Ireland where the Health Minister, Robin Swan, allowed for the laws that apply in Britain to apply in the North, but there still isn't a single abortion provision in the Northern state to this date. This is a very dangerous situation we're facing. It's hugely important that we give a lead in this, and I want to repeat that your government has to show that you're willing to push back to defend the hard-won rights that women have fought for decades in this country. So we would like to know when the review is going to take place and that the abortion will be fully decriminalised, that there will be a review on the 3-day limit and that the 12 weeks limit will also be lifted. These are very important issues for women and for trans people across this country, and we've already seen protests emerging on the streets again, and this will not go away. It's very important that this government, particularly since repeal, signal to the rest of the world that we're not going to tolerate a backlash against women's rights, particularly on the right to choose.
First of all, I thank the Deputy for raising this very important issue. And first of all, I think it is fair to say that the decision on Roe versus Wade was quite shocking in many respects, but fundamentally because it overturns 50 years of jurisprudence. And in other words, what was judicial precedent that over a 50-year period was overturned. But we are different here in this society, and our constitutional framework is different. And the fundamental difference is twofold, I would argue. One, we have the referendum process and mechanism that's built into our constitution since 1937. We can be thankful, and very often the framers of the constitution can get attacked and so on, for different reasons, and some may be legitimate, but fundamentally it was very unusual in the middle of fascist Europe in 1937 that a government brought in a power, a constitution that limited its own power via a referendum and via judicial interpretation also. So that referendum is a powerful mechanism. And we have chosen as a people by a referendum to lay out our framework in terms of determination of pregnancy and the subsequent legislation that was passed in 2018. So that referendum mechanism is crucial. Secondly, it's a salutary lesson also in everyone in this House that we need to avoid, we need to protect or avoid any undermining of the separation of powers. What clearly was afoot in the United States for many, many years, which is very worrying, was the degree to which one could witness the politicisation of the Supreme Court, that people were appointed on the basis of their position on this issue alone. And that's something that we have to now, as a Dáil and as an Oireachtas, we need to double down on upholding the separation of powers as well, because it's a real revelation. Now, in terms of the review is about the operation of the Act of 2018. Phase 1 is almost complete. I'll come back later on the supplementary if we go through that.
Thanks for your views on Roe versus Wade and jurisprudence, but I'm more interested in what this government is going to do to push back against any attempt, and I've no doubt that this will embolden anti-abortionists everywhere. But aside from them, I think we need to know that women's rights are going to be strengthened and not weakened by this government. So that review is hugely important, not least because the figures I gave to you are quite shocking. 770 women have had to travel, and one of the whole reasons for bringing in that legislation was to allow a health service that took care of women's reproductive rights in this country, not abroad. We have a shocking situation, and many women come to us on this issue, where fatal fetal abnormality is not being properly dealt with under our laws, and that also needs to be reviewed. And I'm more interested in that review, when it will take place, and what commitment your government will give to what the Justice Minister said this morning, is that we have to push back against any attempt to undermine abortion legislation in this country. And I've no doubt that that will come. We've already seen evidence of it from various quarters in this Oireachtas, but it will come from other forces as well. So I really want a commitment from you today that the abortion review will be held ASAP, and that you will give a commitment to review all of the features of it, including fatal fetal abnormality, the 3-day week, the 12-week limit, and the full decriminalisation of abortion.
Well, again, I wouldn't be as dismissive as you were of what I just said in relation to the referendum and our constitution and separation of powers, because it goes to the very heart of what happened in the United States. Above everything else, we should avoid the politicisation of the judiciary. That's the basic point I'm making, because that's what led to the decision in Roe versus Wade. And likewise, in terms of the protection of women's rights in this country, I do not see that weakening. In fact, I see it strengthening. The review is about the operation of the Act. We had a referendum about 5 years ago. We have to be faithful to that referendum and to the people's decision, certainly in the immediate aftermath of that, and that's where we are. The phase 1 is almost complete, and there's a lot of research and work gone into the review. Fetal abnormality works both ways as well. We do have to make sure that it's properly that the framework within the legislation is properly adhered to. We do know of cases, I certainly know of a case where the wrong decision was taken, and that hasn't got the level of attention perhaps that it should have, and that needs to be said too. So we do need a rigorous, objective evaluation of the legislation, and I would particularly be concerned about hospitals that are not implementing the legislation. The policy issues that you refer to are broader than the review, and are matters for political parties in this House to raise at any particular time, in terms of if people want to put forward ideas around the liberalisation of legislation or the changing of it and so on. That's a matter for members in the House.